There was a serial killer I read about in California. I forget his nickname, but anyway, he was like really handsome, like just like stunningly handsome. I think he did some modeling actually. He went on a rampage like after he got out, like he killed like five people. He killed an elderly couple. I don't remember it. Anyway, but Casanova Killer, that was his name. That was the nickname they called him, Casanova Killer. And so I named it. I kind of based it on that. I always found that fascinating because there's snakes and spiders that are just so beautiful to look at and so deadly. I find that really interesting because in southern Utah here we have scorpions. I don't know if you know this, but scorpions actually glow under black light. So when I go out with my phone, I can get a black light. I can just go like this, and it looks like an ocean of sparkling, just like fireflies on the ground. Oh yeah, scorpions are so cool. They're really interesting animals. And so yeah, it's always been that's always been fascinating for me. This mix of beauty and death. It almost goes together.
So in that series, how did you bring that out? I guess on
The
stage.
main villain in that movie is a very physically beautiful serial killer artist. And so women find him very attractive. We had stuff like that. Like I remember in jury trials where I had really handsome guys, and there was a problem because like a lot of the female jurors couldn't pay attention, you know. Not for me, I'm fine with that, but the prosecutor had a problem with that. And so there is something about I think it's just this how the external life, the external presence does not reflect the internal presence. That's always been fascinating to me. Like what's on the outside, you have no idea what's on the inside of somebody. And I think that's what basically Desert Plains was about. How well do you know even your spouse? There's a certain level you know your spouse, but there's this level you don't even know them. And so how well can you really know somebody? Solomon Shepherd is a lawyer who got injured and he left. He used to work at the prison, and that's actually a really good friend of mine. He was a social worker at the prison who became a prosecutor and then defense attorney. And so I based a lot of that on him. But I always found it interesting that his views on criminality, they were really like he believed crime was a social construct. He thought people were inherently good and it's society that makes them evil. And I always found that I mean, controversial to say the least, but I always found it interesting. We'd always debate it over lunch. And so a lot of the arguments that Shepard makes, a lot of stuff that happens to him is from those debates that I got. Shepard and Gray is really just an exploration of does society cause crime or is it much deeper than that? And then the first one I just based it on Zodiac. Zodiac is by far for me the most fascinating of all the American serial murderers. So it's a combination of that guy and Zodiac, really.
Who is Gray?
Gray is just the sheriff. She's kind of the foil for Shepard. She's really calm. It's you could say, I was a huge fan of the X-Files growing up, so it's really just Scully and Mulder. I mean, because like I watched I must have watched every episode of X-Files five times when I was a kid. There was no other show on in like the time at the time that was like it. Like it was just nothing. And so I always kind of wanted that dynamic, like that 80s, like will they, won't they? Are they into each other? Are they not? And so I kind of wrote Shepherd and Gray from that. It seemed it got a pretty good reception, so people liked it. But honestly, Jake, any book, any series I write, it's just like, what do I feel like at the time, and will this be fun? And then if those two line up, I'll do it. If they don't line up, I won't do it. I don't care about markets or what's hot or trending or anything. Just am I going to have fun or not?
What did you enjoy about the Grave Singer in that respect?
I really enjoyed The Grave Singer because the smartest guy in that is the villain, and you don't totally know if the hero, because he's after the hero. Shepard was his prosecutor, and Shepard thought he did a good thing, but this guy's like, I was actually innocent, and he's getting back. And I've always been fascinated with that because I had clients that I knew were 100% innocent who got convicted. And so, you know, how do they feel about the prosecutor after? How do they feel? Is it justified? He wants to kill Shepard for what he did to him. He ruined his life. Is that justified? And I thought that was really cool because I towards the end of the book, it's not exactly clear who the hero is, you know, in the grand scheme of things. I love that about the book. Plus, I made him like Suge Knight. He's like 8 feet tall, which I love. So The Deceiving Look is already out. The newest book that I have out is Silent Watcher. So Deceiving Look was about Solomon and his brother. Really, what it was about was familial bonds, because I was going through that at the time. It's like once you start healing later in life, and usually this happens around the age of 40, when you start healing and going back and looking at your past relationships, you realize people you've been connected to your whole life have been really toxic for you. And so that is really what Deceiving Look is. Obviously, there's murder, excitement, chases, but really it's about letting go of people that don't serve you anymore. Because that's what I was going through at the time. I had to cut a lot of members of my family out who were being toxic to me. and Shepard reunites with his brother from this really horrific abusive childhood, and they've both come to different conclusions. The trauma is manifested differently in Shepard. Shepard went into law enforcement, his brother did not. His brother went a different route. And so really the book is about reconciling trauma and toxicity, even though there's murder involved, there always is, but really it's about trauma. I'm completely desensitized. There is nothing that shocks me anymore. And so you almost have to be. We had, as a prosecutor, a defense attorney, me, the public defenders, the private attorneys, we would joke about horrific, horrific things we would be joking and laughing about because it's a defense mechanism. Like like the public defenders, they had this running joke. They had a client, it was in the news where he locked this young girl in a trunk and drowned her. He put a hose in the trunk and slowly drowned her. And they were joking about it. And everybody's just like looking back at the audience like, man, if they see us joking, but I really like understood like this is how they're letting off steam this way. And so I've trained myself to kind of not do that. The one thing I couldn't do, like I could go to murder scenes, autopsy reports, all that stuff. That never bugged me. The one thing I couldn't do was the child porn stuff. Because when you defend a child porn case, you have to actually watch the porn. And so I wouldn't do that. I would hire a investigator and just say, watch it, make sure they're underage, write a report for me. So that was the one thing I never watched, just I never could. But bodies, gore, stuff like that never bothered me. I'm a huge horror fan, so growing up with that, it just never was never a thing. And from the reviews, it's apparently really violent and gory. So go check it out. You'll love it. So speaking back, see, everything goes back to my practice, man. I told you I'm not creative. I just steal from everything I do in the court. But like, there's six types of stalkers. Stalkers are the one case that I forbid my firm, any lawyer at my firm, from taking. They scare the crap out of me. More than murderers, more than serial killers, more than drug dealers. I defended neo-Nazi prison gangs. Stalkers are the only people that have ever scared me. So I instituted a rule at our law firm that we were not allowed to take stalkers. And they've always had a place in my heart of terrifying because I've seen what they do. And so there's six types of psychologically recognized stalkers. And now we're adding a seventh. They're thinking about adding a seventh called a frogger. And so a frogger is someone for where following, harassment, terror, it's not enough. They have to actually feel like they're involved in their life. So what they do is they move into people's houses, they sneak in. So one lady whose interview I read, she said she was laying back on her bed and she glanced up at the ceiling and there was a hole in her ceiling. And she kind of looked a little bit closer and there was an eye looking down at her for like this. And so she called the cops and they figured out this guy had been living in her house for 3 weeks. So just stalking her. So I had to write a book about a frogger, man. They're terrifying. The psychology is so, so scary. And one of the reasons I never took stalkers is because they have no connection to reality. Like when I defend a drug dealer, I know why he's selling drugs. He knows why he's selling drugs. And he's not like, F the government, how they can do this? There's like, just get me the best deal you can. I know I did wrong. It's fine. Stalkers have no idea why society's persecuting them for what they are. Like, dude, you can't show up and just wait at her house for her to come home. And my client would be like, why? Why? But I love her. Why don't they understand? And so I can't get through to them. And that's why I said we can't take these cases. It's too scary. They would start texting me. I would see that slow shift from the victim to me. They'd start texting me at 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. I'd start seeing them show up at places I go to, like restaurants and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, I know what's happening. And so yeah, those guys scare me. So that's what the Silent Watcher is about. Is this about the scariest type of psychological type of client I ever defended? I used to be a boxer and an MMA fighter, so I don't. So I got firearms at home. I can take care of myself, so I don't do that. But I've been writing full time now for 4 or 5 years, and I've been out of practice, so I don't really have that anymore. Um, but yeah, there were stalkers. There was one guy I had, he faked an accent for a year and a half with his victim. They were engaged, and it was finally his friend who told the woman, like, hey, by the way, he's not from there. He doesn't have any money. This is his real name. You don't know anything about him. Year and a half. Can you imagine the dedication it takes to fake who you are for a year and a half? And that's why they're so scary. It's just they're just not here. They're just not here. When you talk to them, you can see it in their eyes. And so that's what the Silent Watcher is about. And I can see why fans are saying it's so violent and gory because they're violent. We're talking about the most violent type of psychological type of criminal there is.